3 weeks before Tim Curry's death, an actor who'd spent the last 7 months performing the role Curry made immortal sat down and wrote him a letter. He never met Curry in person. He wrote to him anyway, one Frank-N-Furter to another, separated by 5 decades and an entire career built in the shadow of a performance that could never quite be repeated. Following Curry's death on 25th August 2026, Luke Evans shared that letter with the world. This is his tribute and the words he never got to say to Curry's face. Luke Evans had just wrapped a 7-month run playing Dr. Frank-N-Furter in the acclaimed Broadway revival of the Rocky Horror Show, his performance earning a Tony nomination and drawing constant, inevitable comparison to the role's originator. Tim Curry had first brought Frank-N-Furter to life on the London stage in 1973 before immortalising the character on film 2 years later in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. A performance that would go on to define the role for generations of actors who followed. Evans' Broadway run concluded on Sunday 23rd August, just 2 days before Curry's death. The timing, in hindsight, would give his tribute an almost unbearable poignancy. 3 weeks before finishing his run, with only 3 weeks left before what he called hanging up the fishnets and heels for good, Evans had sat down and written directly to Curry. In the letter later shared publicly, he explained that although the two had never actually met, Curry had been part of his journey from the very beginning, noting that every actor who puts on Frank inevitably walks into a conversation that started with Curry himself, a presence Evans said he'd felt every single night of his run. Evans went on to describe the strange privilege and burden of constant comparison, writing that being likened to Curry had been one of the greatest compliments of his career, even though it was a comparison no one could ever hope to fully live up to. He was careful to note that he'd never actually tried to recreate what Curry had done. That would be impossible, he wrote, explaining instead that he'd simply hoped to honour the character Curry created while still finding his own version of the role. Evans also shared a warmer, more personal memory in his tribute, recalling a moment at the 50th anniversary screening of the Rocky Horror Picture Show at the Roxy when Curry had quietly told him he had lovely skin, prompting Evans to strike a playful, coquettish pose that made Curry laugh. Following Curry's death, Evans made the decision to publish his private letter publicly on Instagram alongside a fresh tribute reflecting on the loss. He described Curry as a force, a bright, fierce flame, and an exquisite charm, praising the actor's rich vocal tone and calling him an inspiration to Evans and countless others, both for the roles he played and for the effect he'd had on so many people. Evans closed simply, with a line that would become the defining phrase of Curry's tributes that week: "There will only be one Tim Curry." All the rest of them, he added, would simply have to do their best to emulate some of the magic of the role he'd just spent 7 months playing. He closed his tribute with a simple, heartfelt blessing: "God bless you, Tim. You made the world a brighter place." Evans' tribute joined a genuinely widespread outpouring from across Hollywood and the theatre world. Curry's Clue co-star Leslie Ann Warren, who'd played Miss Scarlet opposite his Wadsworth, called him a brilliant, hilarious magician of artistry, writing that she'd adored him and blessing his wild and inspired soul. Carol Burnett, his co-star in 1982's Annie, described him simply as a dear friend, noting that nobody could play lovable villains quite as well as Curry had. Rob Schneider, who'd appeared alongside Curry in Home Alone 2, shared a detailed tribute recalling how Curry could say more with a single knowing grin or raised eyebrow than most actors could manage in an entire scene, and recounted watching Curry perform the same scene 7 completely different ways, all of them excellent, a lesson in generosity Schneider said he never forgot. Rocky Horror Show revival director Sam Pinkleton offered a briefer, more poetic tribute, calling Curry the northernmost star, the centre of the galaxy, and thanking him simply for helping so many performers exist. Luke Evans never got to meet Tim Curry in person. But across 7 months of stepping into a role Curry had defined half a century earlier, he found himself in a kind of ongoing conversation with a man he'd never spoken to, one actor honouring another, across 5 decades, through the simple act of doing the work with care. His letter arrived 3 weeks too early to be a proper goodbye, and just in time to become something more lasting instead, a tribute good enough that grief alone made him want the whole world to read it. If this tribute moved you, share your favourite Tim Curry role in the comments and subscribe for more heartfelt stories from the world of film and theatre.